Today is the 8th of May, so I'm out on the nursery self-videoing and making another YouTube video for you. First week in May is usually blossom time, and this is the beautiful Hawthorne Blossom. I have done a video about Hawthorne as bonsai, so you'll see that in due course. And I'll just show you our apple orchard in bloom. It is fully in bloom, completely covered in flower. So the apple blossom is very, very beautiful at this time of the year. These trees were pruned quite hard last winter, so they're looking a bit bare, but normally they're covered in flower. But the purpose of this video is not about the apple blossom. It's about a conifer which is not much used. And what I'm going to show you is how to make bonsai out of spruce. Spruce, the botanical name is Piscea. That's the genus. And I have some very interesting spruce that I have collected over many, many years. I'm one of those keen plant collectors, and ever since I came to the UK in the mid-60s, I used to visit nurseries, and I could never resist buying plants. Even up to now, whenever I go to an interesting nursery and see something interesting, I will buy it. My wife always used to tell me off. She says, "What do you want another plant for? You've got so many." But you know what it's like, even as bonsai people, however many bonsai you have, you never have enough of them. So I've always bought these interesting plants more for my own enjoyment than to use as commercial plants. And over the years, I've grown to know many, many specialist conifer nurseries and conifer growers, and they respect me because I do have quite a bit of knowledge about conifers, which I've picked up over the years, and they are very happy to share their knowledge and love of plants with me. What I'm going to show you here are two very rare conifers. This is a weeping Piscea. Look at the habit. It weeps and covers the ground. I've had this about maybe 20 or 30 years, and I've just let it grow in pots because I didn't want to lose control of it, because if I plant it in the ground, they'll become too big. They have this habit of weeping. Look at it. It's just a mass of branches weeping to the ground. This is just 1 year's growth, believe it or not. This 3-foot length of growth is just 1 year's growth. So it goes absolutely berserk. This one is quite interesting. I may try and make a bonsai out of it. And then there's another interesting Piscea here. This I picked up at a conifer nursery maybe 5-6 years ago. I cut the top off and I've done nothing to it, and it already looks like a bonsai. And of course, one of the most common Pisceas is the Christmas tree. This is what we call the Norway Spruce. That's the new growth. Of course, Alberta Spruce is also a spruce, but we're not talking of Alberta Spruce today. We're talking of these other conifers. So this is the ordinary Christmas tree. They don't often make nice bonsai, but if you prune it hard back, you notice what I've done here. I've pruned this back over here and allowed the side shoots to grow. Even this blue one, I've pruned the top here, and the side shoots have started growing. Now let's identify it, because a lot of people don't like to refer to their plants by the botanical name. So this is a detail of this blue spruce, and this is a detail of the weeping one, and this is the detail of the Christmas tree or the ordinary Norway spruce. Now, just a little tip for those of you who are new to plants. I always refer to reference books, and I brought out with me today from my bookshelf, it's in this wheelbarrow, my conifer reference book. And here you are. This is a book called Ornamental Conifers by Charles Harrison. I've used this for the last 40 years, and I still use it today. And here we come to the page on Pisceas. And the one that I showed you first, that little one, this is called Piscea pungens globosa. Let me go to that and show you that again. So this is the one, Piscea pungens globosa. And this one, although it's not blue, I think I recognize it from this. I think that is the glauca version. I think I would call it simply Piscea pungens pendula, not the glauca. Glauca means blue. So these are all freaks of nature which have been developed into these collectors' special plants. So I'm going to take certainly 2 of these plants and show you what I can do to make them into credible bonsai. Pity I'm not in the video, but I'm going to wheel these plants in my wheelbarrow and take it into the back greenhouse. So I've come to another part of our nursery. And by the way, these birds that you can hear singing, this is not tape recorded music, this is actual bird song in our nursery. We have so many trees that the birds always nest and live here. Now this area I grow a lot of my other trees, and while I'm here I'll show you another Piscea which I grew from cuttings precisely in the year 1986. This is the famous Eso Spruce. Those of you who have my first book, Bonsai, The Art of Growing and Keeping Miniature Trees, there is an illustration of a group of, I think it was 7 Pisceas, Eso Spruce. That group was imported from Japan in 1962, but after I took the photograph in 1984 for the book, and then I came to the nursery with it in 1986. But I think back in 1990, that group got stolen. But fortunately, I made cuttings from that. So this is Eso Spruce, genuine Eso Spruce, from trees that were imported from Japan in 1962. So over the last 34 years, they've become like 4 or 5 feet tall. I have several of them. I'm going to make large formal upright trees or make them into a forest one day. So that is Eso Spruce. So that is just by the by, because I want to talk about spruces today. And Eso Spruce, of course, is one of the favorite Japanese spruces. There is another spruce here while I'm talking about it. This is another spruce. I don't know what the name is. Again, one of those dwarf ones, but it's become a huge tree. I don't know what to do with it. I'll probably end up growing it as a garden tree. It is absolutely massive, 6 to 7 feet tall. Now, this is the glauca, the purple version of that pungens glauca. And this is the true purple variety. And this I have not allowed to grow big, but over the years I have been pruning it back. And it is partly trained, so I'm going to complete this as a bonsai and show you what this tree will look like. So this one and those 2 big ones in the flower pots I showed you earlier on in the field are all from the same source. So I will now take it into the back greenhouse and make bonsai out of this. So we're going to have a demonstration in this video showing 3 Pisceas which will be transformed into bonsai. The bird song is so lovely, I don't want to leave this place. So here are the 3 conifers that I'm going to work on. These 3 Pisceas to be precise. There's that blue spruce on the right, the Christmas tree, and that weeping one. So, and at this time of the year, all plants, whether they're deciduous trees or conifers, make new growth. And as I explained before, this is a pine, so the pines have this new growth which is in the form of candles, and you've got to deal with the candles if you want to keep it under control. And this Christmas tree also has new growth. So the new growth is like that, and in fact some of these could even be cones. They look like cones to me. And then these also, see, those are the new shoots on that Piscea, but these are probably cones on this tree. So this is a very interesting material. So let's begin by working on each of these in turn. So I'm going to deal with this first one. This one, I'll look at my book again to remind you of the name, is Piscea pungens globosa. So this is the Piscea, and as I told you, when I purchased this tree about 5 years ago, I cut the tip out and I stopped it growing tall, and this has forced some of the branches to grow on the side. And what I liked about this plant is that it's got a very natural curve. Whenever you go to nurseries to select plants, try and find plants which are curvy rather than absolutely straight, because if it is curvy, then there's more scope for you to make it into an interesting tree. So what are the choices on this tree? If you look at this tree, let's leave it in a flower pot now so that it doesn't distract you. So you can use the entire length of this tree and just wire every single branch. The apex is quite nice and you get a nice tall bonsai. If you didn't want the tree to be that big, you can always cut it to about there. Let me show you the famous bag trick again. If I get a white plastic bag, what I mean is we take out that bit. So if you take out the top, you will still get a very interesting tree over here. So you don't have to use the entire length of the tree. You can make it into a tall bonsai, but you can even make it into a cute little tree like this. And it's a very difficult decision as to what to do, because either solution would work and would end up as a very, very beautiful little bonsai. Looking at the curvature of the trunk, I think that this is not bad as a front, although this is very nice and curvy. I think this is still the preferred option. I will just check the roots to see if there are some nice surface roots. I think there are. I usually take it out of the pot, so why not? But you can see all the roots have come through the bottom. So let's take these roots away. There you are, it's come out of the pot very easily. The reason why I always take it out of the pot is because you can then tease the roots at the top, tease the surface roots to see how the roots are displayed, because very often the direction of the roots, or what we call the nebari, the root spread, can give you a very good indication as to what would be the preferred front. So I think there's not much to choose between these different sides, so I will stick with this one. So what I have to do now is to take a very major decision quite early on, because as I said, I have the choice of either using the entire length of the tree to make a tall bonsai, or to make it a short bonsai. So, and I'm not one who dilly-dallies, so I will take this difficult decision and cut it off at the top, like so. I'm going to cut it there. And because I know all my conifers quite well, I know that all spruces, and in particular the Alberta spruce, they grow from cuttings very readily. And since this is a quite rare conifer, I'm going to propagate from this. So I've shortened the tree straight away. And by shortening the tree, I've given it even more interesting trunk line. You can see how the trunk line makes the tree more curvy. So all I now need to do is wire all the branches. There are some thick branches and some thin branches, which makes it difficult because ideally you want all the branches to be of the same thickness. But as you know, in life, nothing is ever perfect. You never get the perfect solution. So you've got to make do with what you've got. So let's begin now. Because the trunk already has this very nice curvy shape, complete S, all form naturally. I'm just going to wire some of the branches to see what happens. And then we take it from there. So starting from the bottom, I don't know why we always start from the bottom. For some reason, most of the wiring is done from the bottom. We never wire from the top downwards. I know this wire is a bit short, but I'm going to put a double piece of wire on it, so no harm. I misjudged there. But this length for the lower branch should be adequate. What I'm doing is wiring the branches down. I will think about reducing the foliage pads in just a minute because I may have to wire some of them as well. So that's the first one, now this little one. And there's the back one. The back one is very heavy. If you look at that pad for the back branch, it's very, very heavy. So I probably won't need all of that. So I'm going to take some of this off. I'll just show you close up. This pad here is in fact a branch, the back branch. And it's clearly very massive. So I'm going to reduce this a bit. More cuttings. And because there is like a natural leading shoot, I can wire that outwards. So that's okay. So I'm trying to create adequate balance throughout the tree so that no single branch is too heavy. So I can wire this one. I'm just going to thin that even more. And now I'm going to wire these two branches. Let me show you because I don't have a cameraman with me. So I'm carrying on wiring. So when you put a double coil of wire, follow the path of the existing wire. Never crisscross it. I'm very fortunate because there is so much material on the nursery that I only have to walk out onto the nursery and I can pick up something which I can play with. Now this side branch, let's see, if it's too long I may cut it, shorten it. You don't know how peaceful it is without the planes flying overhead. So there is always something good that comes out of bad, and the corona has given us lots of peace and quiet. I'm just bringing this gin pliers because I find the gin pliers very useful for terminating the wire ends. Now this other piece of wire is going to go to this back branch. I just noticed I trapped a little branch. Get it free. For those of you who think that you can find these conifers just by walking into a garden center, I think you will be disappointed, because especially in the UK, a lot of these garden centers, being commercial outfits, they only stock plants which are fashionable. And unfortunately, conifers have not been fashionable, I would say, for the last 20 or more years. There was a time, I remember, if we go back to the, I would say, 1980s, 70s and 80s, conifers were quite popular, and especially dwarf conifers. There were a lot of dwarf conifer nurseries that only specialized in propagating dwarf conifers because people love growing them in the gardens. But nowadays, it's very hard to find dwarf conifers. In fact, many of these dwarf conifer nurseries have gone bust because there isn't sufficient demand for this type of plant. But you do get the odd amateur who will still have some of these rare plants. And if you happen to know some of them, then you can find these rare conifers. The beauty of this Piscea is that the needles are so small that it is almost ready-made for bonsai, absolutely ready-made material for bonsai. I'm going to take this bit of wire to the apex, to the top, because it's fairly similar in thickness to the rest of the branch that I just wired. And there's so many little branchlets over here that I can select these to make individual branches for the rest of the tree. Now there's one little branch and one big branch. I think I will keep both, because if I were to get rid of it, I might regret. I need to fill that tree. So let me put another piece of wire. Many people ask, how long do you leave the wire on? And of course the answer is, how long is a piece of string? It depends on the species of plant, how mature or old that branch is. The older the branch, the stiffer the branch, it would take longer to set. But as a rule, if you play with young plants, they normally set within 1 year or even 2 years. So for instance, if I were to wire a Japanese larch, which is about 3 or 4 years old, that would probably set within 1 year. But if I used a much more mature tree, it would take longer to set. So how do you know if the plant is set or the branch is set? Well, give it a try. If you wired it last year and you think it's set, take the wire off and see if it has kept its position. If not, you can put it back again. So it's all by trial and error. In this game, there are no hard and fast rules. If you are looking for hard and fast rules, then you will be sorely disappointed. See, I put a double piece of wire and I've got an interesting double bend there. So I've got 2 more little branches there. So I'm glad I chose the shorter option, because I cut off all that from the top. So I removed the top, so I've reduced it by about 6 inches. And this makes for a much more interesting tree. If you think I'm wiring awkwardly, it's because I'm trying to make sure that the camera sees everything. I always admire these people who do flower arranging from the back, because normally you would do it from the front. So how can you see what's going on? Well, they're trying to perform to the audience. So that's a difficult thing to do. I try not to put too much wire on, for the simple reason that very often you see people train the bonsai and there is more wire than tree. So that would look distinctly odd. Now these little branchlets, they're so tiny. I want to utilize them, but I also want to remove some of the superfluous ones so that it doesn't look too congested. And I'll just wire it very lightly with very fine wire. So as you go up the trunk, always remember to go with the direction of wiring that you've already done for the main trunk, so that it doesn't look untidy. No, this was not long enough, so let me just give more length. Sometimes we have to leave the wire fairly loose, so they're just being guided along a tube of wire really. So although the wiring may look untidy for now, it's not going to strangle these very young shoots. So don't worry too much about it. A lot of people are worried and concerned about making it look like a finished tree. Remember that there's patience involved. Don't be too eager to see the finished products all at once. That's why a lot of these public bonsai demonstrations, they make the complete tree without regard to the future welfare of the tree, and as a result, these demonstration trees end up dead. That's a side of story you never hear. So I'm trying to make a fairly full crown, and you see there's this little branch going that way and that's going that way, so I can make this the leader rather than this bit. So let me just thin this bit, because I'm going to use this as a branch rather than the leader. So what appears to be the leader doesn't always have to be the leader. So I'm virtually there. I'm also going to pot it up because it's only late spring. Let me just do some refining here to make it look less congested. By the way, it's a very, very hot day and I'm literally sweating. But apparently tomorrow, today the temperature is 25, but tomorrow I think the temperature is going to 10 degrees. So the English spring is very unpredictable. One day you can get warm days. We've already had 27 degrees a couple of weeks ago, and today is 25. And tomorrow is going to be 10 degrees during the day. Cold. So getting back to what I was saying, many people have asked, why do you manage to do all your repotting even at this late time of the year? And it's no magic or anything, it's just that I know my trees. I know that whatever I do won't kill the tree. So you've got to know and judge for yourself. The more you practice and more you have experience doing things that suit your local climate and conditions, you will get away with it. So there's no magic about it. It's just that experience will tell you what works and what doesn't work. Because a lot of people have this habit of saying that, oh, I want specific guidance. You've got to do it in February, you've got to do it in March. And if you do it outside those times, the trees will die. Not so. If you have the experience, it should work well for you. So there's that tree complete. And I can put it in almost any type of pot. So I'm going to now tease the roots out. Because this is a dwarf conifer, it hasn't grown so vigorously. So the root ball is very compact and certainly not pot bound by any means. And again, I use this favorite mixture of mine, which is peat or peat substitute and bark and tiny bit of akadama mixed in it. I have potted it on since I purchased the tree. It was in a very small 3 or 5 inch pot, and over the last 5 years it has doubled in height, but I have cut the top out. Now that's as much I'm going to tease out. I'll loosen the roots at the bottom, and this would fit this pot. I'm using only a plastic pot for the moment because this tree has only just started its journey, so there is no need to use sophisticated pots because it's not a finished tree. And this is a plastic pot, and because the holes are fairly small, I do not need to use mesh. Many people feel that even with plastic pots and they have holes this small, they have to use mesh. So you don't have to use mesh. And again, this is common sense. I say it's not rocket science. Now, what did I do to this? I didn't even cut a single root off. I didn't cut any root. I just teased the roots so that it is loose and it will fit the pot, and that's all I've done. So when you think that I'm repotting in the first week in May, which is outside spring, it is still late spring, the tree won't die. So I'm not doing any magic. So let me just use some more of this peaty type compost. I don't want to waste time showing you how to pot the tree up. So there's your tree. Let me show it to you close up. There you are. And I've just noticed that this is a grafted plant. So there is a slight difference in thickness of the stem. So this is the understock, this is the top part. So this tree has been grafted because it's one of those rare varieties. But I will try and make the cuttings anyway. So what I've done, I've used 2/3 of the length of the tree. I've used the side branch. I pulled a side branch up to make the new leader. So I've not used the original leader. And there you are. This is a lovely little tree. How easy is that? Now we'll move on to the next one. So this is tree number 2, second Piscea. And this Piscea, again, all this lovely, beautiful new growth. Some cones here. And the Christmas tree is simply Piscea abies. Now, Christmas trees are very, very difficult to make into bonsai because they have a very sparse habit. They don't make nice trees because they look so sparse and ugly. But if you take the trouble to prune the ends, it will bud back and you will get this dense growth. And just to show you, many people tend to argue with me. I've had a long running argument with people saying that larches don't bud back from old wood, and they also tell me that some of the conifers can't bud back from old wood. Let me show you in detail what is happening here. This is an old tree. Now this young shoot here, look at it. This is all budding back from here. This is all old wood. So it does bud back. Look at it, look at this, look at this. They all bud back from old wood. So don't be put off. They do bud back. So the first thing I do is to take it out of the flower pot. And lo and behold, this plant also has mycelium. I only thought that pines had mycelium, but this is beautiful mycelium, this white stuff, the beneficial fungus. So, and the root tips. See how healthy my plants are. The weeds love it, the weeds thrive in it. Now with most of these plants, you have so many choices. When you do bonsai, you always have a lot of choices. So although it's got fairly interesting trunk there, you can make this the leader and chop the rest of the tree off. And that's the end of the story. And then you do that. But I'm not sure if that will be such an interesting proposition. Let us test it with the bag trick, Peter Chan's bag trick. This bag trick is very useful. It saves you having to take the decision to cut because you can see what will happen. So if I were to just do that, in fact, I've surprised myself because if I were just to do that, it would be an interesting tree with a good taper, quite thick trunk. But I'm going to waste about 70% of the tree. If I look at it from this side, most people would tend to use this as the bonsai and use the entire length of the tree. Now, since I'm always being too drastic, perhaps I shouldn't be too drastic on this occasion. I will use most of the tree. But I have a problem here because there are thin and thick branches. Some of the branches are thick, some of them are thin. So let's get back to this tree again. Again, as with most bonsai decisions, you are always faced with multiple choices. And I'm really in a dilemma because I know that if I were to chop the rest of the tree off, as I showed you earlier, I would get a very interesting tree with an excellent taper. So the tree would really look like this if I can hide the rest of the tree with that bag. I'm going to hide all that. So we're going to just use this as the bonsai. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. And that would make a very interesting tree because it would have a very interesting curvy trunk line. And I'm sure I can make a good tree with that. But since I'm very drastic, I will use the entire length of the trunk and see where I go from there. Now a lot of these branches are very long. This I might use. This little one, several branches here. Now these two thick ones here, they're clearly too thick, so I don't usually like making gins, but let's do a little bit of a stub in case we want a gin. I'm not a great lover of gins because a lot of people use gins indiscriminately and they put gins here, there and everywhere. No, what the hell, it's so ugly. You don't need that. And by the way, they all make cuttings very easily. They all produce from cuttings. That's the beauty of conifers, except the pine. The pine is very hard. I don't know many pines that grow from cuttings. Like black pine, I always thought black pine wouldn't air layer, but I had someone, one of my YouTube viewers told me that black pines do in fact air layer. So that's something new I learned. So always keep an open mind. So I'm trying to keep thin branches where possible. As far as possible, keep the thin branches. Now, even if I were to use this as the front and bend it back on itself, do you think I can get a bend in that? I might be able to bend. So why not? I will just split the branch. Let me get my branch splitter. Even if I did not decide to use the bend, it's still okay, the tree won't die. Many people asked, how do you use the branch splitter? The branch splitter, by its name, is meant to split a branch. So when you use it, you let the two blades touch in the trunk, so the two blades meet, so you're cutting right through the trunk. So that's what you do when you use a branch splitter. So the theory, again, if I may be boring you, is that we're making one thick piece of trunk or wood, which is difficult to bend, into two thinner pieces, which will be far easier to bend. So in fact, it is like making a laminate or plywood. Why does plywood bend so easily? Because it is a laminate of 3, 5, 7 or even more pieces of thin wood, and that makes it easy to bend. So that's why plywood is used for making all these fancy forms that you get in chairs and other furniture. So that is how you create ply, and the same principle is used when we are doing the trunk splitting. So once it's split, it makes it far easier to bend. So already you can see it bends. And I think you can also split it crosswise, both this way and that way. So I'm making two cuts at right angles to each other. So it makes the bend even more easy to achieve. Now, does the tree die? No, the tree will not die, because the sap flows up and down the cambium or the xylem or whatever it is, and it does not interfere with the flow of the sap. So you're quite safe to do it that way. And what happens to the marks that you have cut? Well, they will just heal over and make the tree look gnarled. So don't worry about the marks from using this cutter. So there you are. It's become quite bendable, very, very bendable. So let me use a thick piece of wire and see if I can get some curve in that. I'm going to use this as an anchor and take it to the top. I'm not going to wire it all the way from the bottom of the trunk because that bend is quite interesting. I'm just going to anchor it to this thick branch. Whether I use this branch or not, I haven't decided, but while the tree is in training, it doesn't matter. So I'm just using that branch as an anchor point. And this is quite modest wire. I think it's only 4 or 4.5 mil. I'm making sure I don't trap these little shoots because they will all grow. I know I have to use a double, so I'm not worried if the wire is a bit short. Now it hasn't gone all the way to the apex. That's okay. I'll put another piece of wire and make sure the other piece does go to the top. So usually with thick trunks like this, you invariably need a double coil. So don't usually do this, but in order to make sure I use the right length, I will not cut the wire just yet. I'm not wiggling a great big coil of wire, so that's okay. Keep the wire neat. Now I can cut the wire. I find the gin pliers very, very useful because to terminate the ends of quite thick wire, anything thicker than 3.5 mil is very hard to bend with the fingers. So the gin pliers helps you to make that little coil at the end. So now let's give this a twist. I have not said which is going to be the front or which is going to be the back. And those of you who know me will know that by now I always mark the front or the back with a piece of wire. So I think the front is going to be somewhere here. So that is the front of the tree. Okay, let's try and bend it. Moment of truth. I've often snapped the trunk when you do that. So no worries. As we say, this expression, even monkeys fall out of trees, you can have a mishap. So don't worry about that. Okay, so I've got that. Now this is usable, this is usable. Now it turns out that this is usable, so I will keep these. So let's see what we get from using that. these two. I hope the back won't turn out to be the front, because I've often had the experience of working on a tree, and when you finished it, what you thought was the front is better suited as the back, and what was the back is better as the front. I remember the first demonstration that Mr. John Knocker did in the UK in 1976, I think it was. He made everyone laugh by saying, the back side is better than the front side. So, and of course, a lot of embarrassing laughter because the ladies didn't like it. I won't do the refining just yet, because I can always refine it after I've done the entire tree. I will adjust the length of all these branches and thin it where necessary. So I've been able to use these. I'm keeping this whether I use it or not. I can always decide later on, but it can act as a sacrificial, or it can be developed for the future. So I'll keep it. Never be in a rush to do anything. Now the apex, this was the apex here. I've used the apex to bend down, so sometimes you can do that. Now I can use those two branches. There's a little stub there which looks ugly, but I won't cut it because I will use it to anchor these wires, or maybe I can reduce it a bit. Remember that this is not the finished article. It's got a couple of years more before it can be refined, so you can do the refining later on rather than damage the tree in case it loses too much moisture from there. So these two branches I will wire. There are a lot of these small branches that we probably won't need. As I said, it's always very tempting to get the finished article, but because you just started training the tree, there is no rush. There is absolutely no rush in trying to get the perfect tree just yet. Just create the structure of the tree for now, and in due course it will turn out okay. This is where learning patience is quite important. People say, oh yes, it teaches you patience, but do they actually practice patience? And that's another matter. I don't think you need this one because this is going to overhang. And the rest is simple stuff. I'm now just going to produce a crown. The crown, or the top part, is very important. Many people just like to take one shoot pointing upwards. I always call it like, you know, the Red Indians have a feather in the headdress. It's more than that. I think you need to create a nice rounded dome. My, I've just heard a plane flying overhead. This is the first plane I've heard in 4 weeks. Because our local airport Gatwick has been shut, I believe, but there are some flights coming in. Maybe a sign that the corona is going to end soon. Who knows? This is how we make a rounded crown, so that it's full. Pity I'm cutting a lot of these potential cones off. I would have loved to see these cones. I'm just doing a zigzag to shorten this branch a little bit. And there you have the tree. I won't bother to pot it up. I may do the final potting and show you the finished article, but that is the tree done. So that's number 2. I wasn't going to show you the repotting or the potting up process, but I might as well show it to you. Again, I'm going to tease around the soil because there's quite a lot of trunk hidden below there. And again, we've used this very nice PT compost. It's not a bonsai compost by any means. There is an ugly root there, but it could be a feature. It may not be that ugly. Now the size of pot I'm going to choose, because it's getting into early summer, it's late spring, and I don't want to cut too much root off if I can help it. So I haven't cut anything yet, I've just rearranged the soil. This root ball is very compact. In fact, it would go in there. Hardly any root cuts. You see these edges are fine. So look at it. To show you I'm not cheating, that's all I've removed. So I'm going to cut that single root. So when you question me and say why do the trees not survive, it's because I'm not cutting much. This tree fortunately fits this pot very well. So that's all I have done. I'll show you the finished thing in a minute. So there you are. It fitted that pot perfectly. Beautiful trunk line. I will show you all the finished trees when I've done them all. So this is the tree number 3. And number 3 is the Weeping Spruce, and the botanical name is Piscea pungens glauca pendula. Glauca means it's got a glaucous bluish color. So the natural habit is to produce these weeping branches. And this tree has been growing on the nursery for a long, long time. And it was lying on the side, creeping along. And I cut off some of the other branches. And I've just let a side branch grow up. And when it grew up, we put a guy wire there to tighten the S bend. And all these gins, believe it or not, they are all natural gins. So I thought I'd show you a detail of this. We just cut the branches off, and you can see over a period of years, the bark just rots away. And this is all natural. We haven't made any artificial or man-made gins. So in nature, when you see driftwood on junipers especially. This happens in nature when the tree just loses a branch, and the gins or this driftwood effect occurs very naturally, and the effect is very nice. We can refine it a bit, but this is the shape of the tree. We've got to decide what style to give it. It's already got a very interesting curve, so we're going to exploit that curve, but I may reposition the angle slightly. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this grass and tease below the soil surface, and we should find more trunk and interesting nibari underneath. This is what I call a medium-sized tree. Big trees are anything 3, 4, 5 feet. This is not even 2 foot. So this is very small as far as I'm concerned. There's some ugly roots here, so I'm going to get rid of them because I know I've got sufficient root to play with, so anything obviously crossing I get rid of. So much more trunk underneath. This is where the true roots are. So while I'm doing this, I'm looking at the tree from every angle to see which is the potential front or back of the tree. I always, as I say, keep an open mind in case I have to change my mind. Well, these are just the odd roots that I'm cutting off. It's not a lot of fibrous roots. The fibrous or feeding roots are the ones you should not tinker with. You see, these are all thick roots which support the finer roots, I think. So that goes into the soil. I can always cut it off at a later date. Now let's see what position I can put this tree in. I could tilt it a little bit like this. I think it lends itself to that. So let me just put a pot underneath. So if I prop it up, I get a better angle. See, it gives a very nice curve. So I improve the curve by doing that. Why this gin is coming back on itself like that. Let me get rid of it. So I've got a beautiful trunk line there. Let's see if it's nice from the other side. This side is also nice. Well, I'll just train it and see how it turns out without having any preconceived ideas. This is a bit of distraction on this side, but the main tree is really here. I don't think I need this somehow. So let's get rid of that. I'm just playing around with the branches to see how I can wire it. Okay, I think that's the way I would go. And because this turntable is too high, let me just lower it a little bit. I'm also going to see if this guy wire is doing anything. No, I don't think the guy wire needs to be there. So I will remove the guy wire. So I'm going to take that leader like that and make it a head. I'm going to use fairly thick wire. I wish I had a cameraman to get in on the detail, but we can't have everything. So I'm just anchoring the wire on another branch. So I have the two branches that are needed. And then I'm going to wire this, which is going to be the future apex of the tree. I know that they will thicken quite readily, so I'm not worried how it will grow. Very difficult species to make into bonsai because look at the needles, they're so long. That's why Piscea are not the most popular species for using to make bonsai. So you will find that not many people use this species. Make sure I don't break it. Although, even if it breaks, so what? It'll grow again. You can get another branch to grow. So never be worried. If you just hold the branch in your palm of the hand, that should help it along and prevent it snapping. But having said that, I've often made the mistake of snapping it. Well, it's bent quite easily without splitting the trunk. Lots of branches to wire. Look at all this lovely growth. I'm going to cut all that lovely growth off. Now let's wire these two bits. I do not need that one. All conifers bud back easily, so don't worry. I'm sure that once we start developing this into a bonsai, the constriction of our bonsai pot will reduce the needles quite considerably. I think you can treat this almost like a one needle pine. Instead of having two needles, these only have one needle, so it's exactly like a pine. So you can pinch the needles in the same way you do with a pine. Okay, now let's do these two branches. This and this. I must admit I've never ever made a bonsai with this variety because I've got 3 of these plants, but I've never thought of using it for a bonsai because they're too nice as ordinary plants to waste for a bonsai. But this has always been a challenge, and since we're dealing with Pisceas, I thought I'd show you how to do this one. The only trouble with these so-called dwarf conifers is that there's never any conifer that is dwarf. It used to be a lot of laughing matter in the conifer world because although you may think that conifer is dwarf and you grow it in your garden, it becomes a large tree. The Bouvernensis can grow to about 40-50 feet, and that's considered a dwarf conifer. And so there are many species that are called dwarf, but they are never actually dwarf. Too thick. I always prefer using the thin branches. Now I haven't said which side is going to be the front. I think I've opted for what I thought originally was the back side, and I'm going to use this as the front. What I thought was the back I'm going to use as the front. There's a bit of an ugly root sticking up from there. I'll get that off because I know there's enough root underneath. I don't have to worry about that. Sometimes a dead root can be used for making the driftwood effect, so you can use that. So I've more or less finished the tree. So if we have a good look at it, that's what it looks like. this bit can become a piece of driftwood, which can be refined later. Never rush to do the driftwood because you can always take your time to do it. Although when the wood is still alive or the bark is alive, it's easier to get the bark off. Once the branch is dead, it's very hard to get the bark off. So this is going to be quite a long video, and I know that many of you like long videos, so I don't feel bad about it. That branch I will leave for now because it may thicken it, so that's going to be a sort of sacrificial branch. So again, the root ball is pretty compact, and I will try and get it into some sort of literati pot because this tree has a literati character to it. So let me finish there and come back to it when all the trees are potted up. So after working for maybe an hour and a half or at most 2 hours, we finished making these 3 Pisceas. This one that I'm looking at, this is the Christmas tree. This is, I would say, about 58 to 60 centimeter tall. It's got a crown complete. I split the trunk on it, so I've got more curvature in the main trunk. And I kept the entire height of the tree, although there was an option to make it a shorter tree. So that is that tree looking very nice. Normally I would have taken this little branch on the lower left completely off because it's much smaller than the rest of the branches, but I'll let it grow because when it eventually grows, it'll add balance to the tree. The crown is already quite nice. So I'm quite happy with this tree, and it's in a round pot, so you can turn it around whichever way you wish. So that is that one. Now let me give you a critique of the next one. Now this is the other one that I did. This in fact was the first one that I tackled, and this was Piscea pungens globosa. It's a blue spruce, Piscea pungens globosa. And as you can see, it's got a beautiful curvy trunk line, and I've used virtually all the branches, although I cut off 1/3 of the tree because I didn't want it too tall. I'm glad I did because as it is, it's rather lanky for the thickness of trunk. But again, this has turned out very nicely. And to show you some of the detail, got beautiful new buds in there. And where I've cut the tree to make this new apex, you can hardly see it. That's where I cut it at the back. And this is the back of the tree. The back is as nice as the front. And the pads are well formed. So this species obviously lends itself to bonsai. This is a ready-made bonsai. I virtually did nothing to it. Absolutely nothing. So this is a cute little tree. Although I say it's little, I would say it's about 45 centimeter tall, 45 to 50, and it's in a temporary plastic training pot. It can eventually go maybe in a round pot because all these tall trees have that literati character about it, but it's an informal upright tree. Now let's look at the third one that I made. So this is the third one. The tree number 3, and this one has quite a thick trunk. You don't realize how big it is until I put my hand next to it. The trunk is every bit, I would say, 3 inches diameter minimum at the base. It's got beautiful roots here, and these are all natural gins that have been formed over many years, just letting the tree die. I've left this little branch because I want to use it as a sacrificial to thicken this part. So hopefully this will thicken in time. But the tree being quite old, you see it's got very craggy old bark. and there's a natural bend there. This was the bend that gives it the cascade effect, because all these trees cascade naturally. But I've wired it to make it a literati type tree. So this tree is about 1 meter tall, quite tall. So I want to keep it as a literati type tree. And there you are, I've ended up with that tree. So as I always say, nothing is impossible. You can make bonsai out of anything. So this is how this particular tree turned out. And if we put all 3 of them together, it'll give you some idea of the scale. And this was a very good afternoon spent, rather than just sitting in front of the television, watching television. I decided to spend my time making some bonsai and doing some bonsai videos. So those are the 3 that I did this afternoon. It's a very hot afternoon. So this is a good day's work, and I hope it won't be too long before this video is shared. Of course, we have so many videos in the pipeline that my manager Bodhi doesn't know which videos to show. So I'm putting her to a lot of trouble and a lot of work. And of course, again, without Bodhi, none of these videos would be available to you. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this little experience of making Piscea bonsai. So these are all spruces. So spruces have featured quite a lot this year in our videos, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And there you go. And that's my afternoon done.